My name is Paul Shelley, and welcome to The AstroHistorian, a channel dedicated to exploring and explaining the lore of sci-fi and space universes and discussing their impact. Today we'll be diving into the often requested episode of one of the most mysterious and unknown civilizations in the Star Citizen universe, the Kr'Thak. Before we get started, I want to personally thank y'all for your continued support. We have over 16,000 subscribers and rising, so if this is your second time you've watched one of my videos, make sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell icon to be notified when these are released. Now let's learn about one of the most mysterious alien civilizations in the Star Citizen universe. We know little about the civilization of the Kr'Thak, and what we do know is likely highly propagandized by the Xi'an, who are the main source of knowledge on the civilization. The Kr'Thak are the rivals of the Xi'an and have been fighting with the Xi'an continuously for thousands of years, in what the Xi'an call the Spirit Wars. We also know their home system, Krell, is on the opposite side of Xi'an space, far away from human space. Finally, the name Kr'Thak does not conform to the Xi'an language, which implies that the name is likely what the civilization calls themselves and not a name given to them by the Xi'an. Beyond that, we have little explicit information about the civilization. However, we can learn a lot about them based on the Xi'an and their own reactions to their ancient rivals. When humanity learned the existence of the Kr'Thak during the thawing of the Cold War between the UEE and the Xi'an Empire, a small segment of the UEE government, spearheaded by a few senators, privately funded an attempt to reach that civilization. In 2943, they sent an emissary, a private freelance hauler named Jenk Galen with a colorful past, into Xi'an territory to try to make their way to the Kr'Thak borders. However, this attempt was caught almost instantly and created a major interstellar incident that then Imperator Costigan had to deal with. The Xi'an likely knew the purpose of the operation and intentionally made a huge deal out of it, calling him a spy they caught inside their territory. The incident was made very public by the Xi'an in an attempt to embarrass the UEE. In response, the Imperator demanded Galen be let free, which the Emperor of the Xi'an themselves refused. In response, the Imperator personally authorized the High Advocate to conduct Operation Scimitar. This was designed to saber rattle against the Xi'an. The operation itself involved flooding the Xi'an border systems with advocacy agents to crack down on criminals, human and Xi'an alike. This was likely an attempt to capture some of the Xi'an-sanctioned criminal houses operating inside UEE space, as a means to throw the accusation of espionage directly back at the Xi'an government. When the Xi'an didn't budge, the UEE military began mobilizing and conducting joint war simulations designed to fight the Xi'an in Magnus. It was this major escalation of military mobilization that brought the Xi'an Empire to the negotiation table to talk about conditions. Eventually, an agreement of military cooperation in Hador would lead to the pilot's release and an ease of tensions between the two governments. The fact that the Xi'an were willing to escalate to potential war with the UEE over a single traitor who likely barely made it into their systems should indicate how much the Xi'an fear humanity and the Kr'Thak even talking with one another. The Xi'an are not a rash culture, believing in slow and methodical political movements, with everything being calculated due to their long lifespans. The fact that the Xi'an would suddenly clamp down on this situation shows that it is likely they would instantly go to war with humanity if we ever did make contact with this distant species, out of fear of a combined force being brought against them. So we know that the Kr'Thak are at least a big enough threat to the Xi'an that if they ever teamed up with the UEE, at least the Xi'an themselves think they would be in for big trouble. We also know from the start of the Third Imperial Age of the Xi'an Empire that they are deathly afraid of them to the point of avoiding any way of provoking them. In 1305 CE, an important imperial family celebration of the Second Imperial Age, in honor of the house's great matriarch and first emperor, was struck by the Kr'Thak. They hit the gathered Xi'an house's location with a brutal orbital bombardment, leaving nothing but a massive crater behind. Then, the Kr'Thak activated dozens of strike forces around the Xi'an Empire, systematically targeting any location with a remaining member of the imperial family. When the dust had settled, countless innocent Xi'an had died, but the Kr'Thak's plan had succeeded. The entire imperial family had been eliminated, and their house's long reign was over. Because being the emperor required a specific genetic mark, this strike was purposely designed to erase that entire genetic marker. The Kr'Thak knew this would throw the Xi'an into a succession crisis and internal chaos. This period of strife is known as the Dark by the Xi'an, which should give you an idea of how devastating this was to their civilization. This happened almost 1,000 years after the start of the Spirit Wars between the two civilizations. So when this happened, the Xi'an war effort against the Kr'Thak began to fall apart due to a lack of coherent command and direction from a central house. Eventually, the consensus was reached by the great houses that the only way to find a new emperor and restore order was to negotiate peace with their longtime enemy, which, surprisingly, the Kr'Thak seemed to be okay with. At this point, it's important to illustrate that we only know this information from the perspective of the Xi'an and what they were willing to give us. However, we can still analyze what they have given to try to understand the motive behind their side of the story. The fact that we learn of them as ruthless, caring not for the innocents killed, illustrates that the Xi'an want to paint the Kr'Thak as barbarians. Their quick decapitation also tells us that the Kr'Thak are efficient and skilled, deceptive but equal adversaries to the Xi'an. The fact that decades of fighting continued even after the loss of the imperial family is an attempt to show that the Xi'an are strong and united even if there is no leader, while also showing their need for a strong central figure in order to maintain their society. Remember that this is also likely the simplest versions of these events, taught to the average Xi'an and not bold-faced lies, because by now, there have been enough Xi'an defectors to the UEE who would have known this story growing up in school. Still, likely propaganda, but important to note that this is likely still a popular story told about the rise of the Third Imperial House. So when we read between the lines, we can start to see what are likely more facts than the Xi'an realized they gave to us. Because the Kr'Thak were able to insert strike teams deep inside Xi'an territory to perform an almost instantaneous strike on the entire Imperial household that are near peer with the Xi'an, that kind of technology, tactics, and skill means they likely had the ability to push any advantage made in the aftermath, possibly even bring down the entire Xi'an Empire, as it was decades of arguing after the attack before the Xi'an offered ceasefire terms. However, they didn't press the advantage. They seemed to hold their ground. The Xi'an gave us no indication of a massive loss which forced them to the table, but a crisis of leadership. To me, this points to the fact that the Kr'Thak weren't the aggressors in this conflict. The Xi'an were. This is further corroborated when we learn that when the Third Age came about, with the ascension of the House Kr'Thak to the imperial family, after the ceasefire, they banned all exploration in the direction of the Kr'Thak and redirected their efforts away from that space. Funny enough, this would drive them directly into human space many years later. While the Xi'an may never admit it, it seems like they kicked a hornet's nest and regretted it, and now are far too scared to try and press their luck again, being happy to maintain the ceasefire for thousands of years. So this ancient enemy of the Xi'an, with the ability to destroy an entire family lineage that is likely the best guarded family in one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, is not an expansionist species. They want to be left alone, using their significant power only when they are threatened and willing to back down in order to maintain their territory. Using some meta-information from the developers, we also know that at least at one point, the Kr'Thak were intended to be a heavily information-based species, with a near-instantaneous communication ability. Thus, they could communicate between star systems in the blink of an eye in some way. This would go a long way to explaining how they could coordinate their strike to eliminate the entire Imperial family in such a short time. However, this statement was made by Eric Peterson, who no longer works for CIG, and has said that the idea has evolved since his time there. So we should take that with a grain of salt, as it has likely changed or evolved. With this all being said, this leads me to my theory on the civilization. I believe that the Kr'Thak are an AI race. either built by the Xi'an or another long-dead or merged creator species. Their technological prowess, and the name the Xi'an gave their conflict with them, the Spirit Wars, would be explained if they were species of artificial intelligences, without souls. It would also help explain how they could infiltrate some of the most secure space in the galaxy to perform that assassination. It also blends well with the theme of AI being a dangerous mistake, proving to be a harsh counter to the expansion of organic species, very similar to how AI have always seemed to fail humanity when we try to use them for our own expansion. No matter what, we will find out sooner or later. The home system of the Kr'Thak is planned to be released in the game at some point, likely opening a Pandora's box when it does. Time will tell who or what the Kr'Thak truly are, but one thing is for certain: they will lead to nothing but trouble for humanity when they finally make contact. I'd like to thank you for watching, and I'd like to thank those Patreons on screen now for helping me make this all possible. If you want to join them, the link is in the description. For as little as $5 a month, you get early access to videos just like this, including a timed exclusive covering the entire history of the Star Citizen universe, whose first episode has recently been released for the public. Check it out now to see what $5 a month will get you. For now, let me know what you think about the Kr'Thak in the comments below. And as always, remember, ex Historia ad Astra.